Hi, it's Louise at Spiral Bright Insight. I want to talk about the solstice in this particular video. Now, if you're new to my channel, my name's Louise Platt. I'm a galactic and an intuitive astrologer. And what I try and do with all the content that I share on this channel is to really bring my own perspective and insight into some of the key astrological events and transits that are taking place, bringing in sometimes, if relevant, the fixed stars and cosmic points and their energies and how they are showing up and what messages they might have for us, but also to try and bring in my own perspective. Now, with astrology, I'm guessing that most people that watch my content have got an interest in or are experienced astrologers. You will know that there is not one size fits all approach when it comes to interpreting astrology, and it is vast. I don't think I will ever stop learning or studying this incredible modality. I certainly learn something new every single day without exception. So this is my own perspective and my own take. But my intention is, my hope is that you will resonate with what I share. And if you don't necessarily agree with it all, there will be one or two takeaways, or perhaps I will invite you to see something in a slightly different light than perhaps you might have considered before. So the solstice chart, this is when the sun moves into 0 degrees of Capricorn, is a really, really interesting chart. And I wanted to bring in a few observations that I'm kind of guessing, or maybe even hoping, you might not have heard elsewhere. So I'm going to just before I show the chart, solstice is obviously when the sun moves into 0 degrees of the cardinal sign. So we have in the northern hemisphere, sorry, we have winter solstice is when the sun moves into Capricorn, and that is on the 21st of December. And then we have summer solstice when the sun moves into Cancer. We also have the two equinoxes either side of those, when the sun moves into 0 degrees of Aries in the spring in the northern hemisphere, and Libra in the autumn. So, these are particularly powerful days, and it really is a time to pause. It's a time of stillness, a time to reflect, to really sort of, especially at the end of, it marks sort of the final days of 2024. It's a great time to really sort of stop and consider all that you've learned, all that you've achieved, all that's happened in the past 12 months, and perhaps sort of think about what it is that you want to bring in and work on next year in the coming 12 months. So from an astrological perspective, this is when the sun is on the cardinal axis or the world axis, the 0 degree of the cardinal signs. So often, the energies are going to be enhanced. They're certainly going to be emphasized as potentially energies that are affecting us all at a global level. What we do is we will look at the chart and we see it as almost a snapshot of what is likely to be happening over the next 6 months. So it is very much, because this is the solstice and it is tracking the voyage and the journey of the sun, it is very much all eyes on the sun being the brightest light in the chart, really lighting up, a particular part of your chart, which it will do, at the same time every year because of the sun's path around the 12 signs. So, this is about sort of looking at where you have 0 degrees of Capricorn, if you've got any planets or angles or asteroids in proximity, because they are likely to be influenced as well. They may be talking loudly, shining more brightly. And it's also really bringing attention to the Capricorn energy. So Capricorn, is traditionally at the top of the chart. It's the 10th sign. This is cardinal Earth. This feels like something that is very much in the public eye and the world eye, on the world stage. this is drawing attention to something that perhaps feels like it has been a long time coming, because Capricorn, really is about success, but Capricorn has to put in a lot of work to reach the top. This is a long, hard slog, a long, hard climb up that mountain, up that hill, not always knowing really what is at the summit because it's hard to see, but having that faith and that perseverance and that determination just to keep on going. So, again, this is a nod to that sort of energy, that effort that has been put in. It is definitely something that is likely to feel quite real, quite solid, quite tangible, that perhaps, we are having the spotlight on at this time. And for me, because it's at the top of the chart, it often serves as a bridge between the earthly realms and the spiritual realm. So this is very much for me a theme of ascension. It's certainly full of potential as well, with that 0 degree, being that sort of point of rebirth, of reset. And as I said, just before, it is that time when we do step into that stillness where we pause, because it is in that space, in that pause, that we can bring in something new. With that 0 number, the energy is magnified and it is absolutely full of promise. So let's look at the chart. I'm not going to go through all the aspects and all the alignments and all the placements here. But there are a few things that I want to draw attention to, particularly the fact that the moon is at 13 degrees of Virgo, which obviously is a very earthy sign. This is mutable earth. But Virgo is the sign that we associate with the body, but also with service and with purity, with refinement, with health, with healing. And the moon in Virgo is exactly opposite Saturn down here in Pisces at 13 degrees. And if you watched my recent video about sort of an energy check-in, I talked about the number 13 and how, for me, it's the number of the divine feminine, of the goddess. It's also a number that I associate with Christ consciousness. So interesting that, we're working with 13 degrees of Pisces, very, very spiritual, but also it is a disruptor number. So it comes in to almost sort of shift the order around, to change things up. And obviously we are on this mutable axis of Pisces and Virgo here, so there is definitely some shifts happening, shifts that we're going to feel at a quite physical level, possibly in our bodies, even because this is Virgo, but also that we're going to have to really sort of process at a spiritual level as well, because we're working with Pisces. So this is really an interesting opposition to have at the time of this solstice. But let's have a look at a couple of things that I was really quite surprised to see, but also very excited. So if we look up here, this is asteroid Hecate. She has been coming in and speaking to me a lot lately. I've mentioned her in quite a few of my recent videos. This is the goddess of witchcraft and intuition, very much linked to spells, to magic, to wisdom, and also to the underworld. So she will take us into the liminal space, into the beyond. And she also works with the number 3. So this is very much for me bringing up the image of the maiden, the mother, and the crone, that sort of trinity of that divine feminine wisdom that comes through the different stages of a woman's life. She's here in Scorpio at 0 degrees. So Scorpio, very much a sign of healing, also sort of regeneration, rebirth, but also destruction, going beneath the surface to see what is hidden, very comfortable at working with the shadow, understands that we are here to shine light on the shadow to bring ourselves into wholeness. And if we come round, we can see that Hecate is creating a square to Pluto in Aquarius. So this is sort of the first observation that I wanted to highlight, because for me, Pluto in Aquarius is really helping to transform the idea and the association that we have with those who have been cast aside, the outsiders, those people that live on the fringe, the ones that perhaps may have been seen as weird, eccentric, but possibly even dangerous because of their alternative beliefs, because they stand against the status quo, because they question what normal society is happy to go along with and accept. So Pluto in Aquarius is really helping to shift that, to bring those outsiders back into the fold and to almost put them into the spotlight so that they are no longer having to hide away. They're no longer being ostracized and rejected and led and marginalized. That these people are going to start to be able to step far more into themselves and become part of society again, because this is about seeing that everybody has something unique and amazing to contribute, and that, we are moving past and beyond the times when we need to cast people away or out if they don't agree with what we believe in. So the fact that we have this square with the goddess of witchcraft, for me, is really bringing to light and putting a real sort of strong tension and focus on what I describe as the witch wound. So all those people that have been persecuted, have been marginalized, have been shamed, have been rejected because they had these amazing gifts, because they were a threat, because they were feared, because they were different. This square is really creating this tension that really means that deep transformation has to come to that whole theme, that whole area. And it is about bringing these, people who have this deep intuition, this deep wisdom, this deep ability to go into the shadow and to really bring in some really intense and very profound healing. These people are going to be able to come more into themselves and more into society and be accepted and to be honored for who they are. So this for me is sort of stage one, or within this chart of this witch wound, really sort of coming to this crucial head point, to this tipping point where there's no option other than to move through this and to experience the huge transformation and the liberation and freedom that Pluto can give us through his transit in Aquarius, because of course Aquarius is about freedom as well, freedom for humanity. Now we have a couple of T squares. We have the nodal axis now at 2 degrees. Again, I talked about the fact that the south node is next to or on the supergalactic center at this time, but it's creating a cardinal T square with the sun. So this is really sort of showing that, the sun is shining a light on something that is taking place at a public world level, because it's on the world axis, that is really helping us to step into more of our soul evolutionary growth and path. So forcing us perhaps to release attachment to unhealthy situations, unhealthy relationships, situations where perhaps we have been attached to or influenced by something that is not in our greatest good, that is holding us back from stepping into our full potential. And really, as we're able to let go of that and move away, and the supergalactic center is 100,000,000% helping with that process, we are able to step into more of the self, to more of the leaders that we are all meant to be, to become more sovereign, to become more empowered, and also to be sort of harness some more courage as well, to sort of step into sort of somewhere that perhaps we have never been before, because Aries is the pioneer. Aries is really willing to take that step forward and to go into new places, to step into new worlds, to new ways of being. So this is a really interesting sort of aspect to have at this solstice. And of course, I mentioned the Moon and Saturn opposition. We've got Jupiter here forming another T square. So this is a mutable T square. Again, the T square will create a lot of tension. Something has to give, for sure. And, with Jupiter here in the midst of Saturn and the moon talking to each other, or, trying to almost pull each other a different way and trying to find that middle balance, Jupiter is bringing in some new information to really help that process along. Jupiter, obviously opposite the great attractor, which is, another cosmic point. So Jupiter has got information that is perhaps coming from within, because Jupiter is retrograde, that is really helping to see behind sort of those doors, behind that curtain, behind the mountain, if necessary, to really see what was not necessarily visible before, and it is very much aligned with the frequency of truth. So there are new truths coming to light that we're going to have to really feel into them through our bodies, through the moon in Virgo, to have discernment, to make sure that we do resonate with it. And I think that the moon in Virgo is going to help us to process that in a very physical way. But it's also, making sure with Saturn in Pisces in the square to Pluto, to Jupiter, that this information that's coming through, it is absolutely helping us to expand and grow into a bigger version of ourselves. But it has to be in line or aligned with our more spiritual self, with our higher self, with all that is compassionate, with a higher truth. And it's helping us to step into a more mature and masterful version of ourselves. And while, Venus doesn't play a part in that T-square, Venus is still talking to Jupiter because they are in an air trine. So Venus in Aquarius is really helping us to, again, for me, connect with the value and the worth of perhaps, the parts of you that you may have felt were easier to hide away, that perhaps made you feel like the black sheep, that perhaps, were not in line with the status quo, that did keep you marginalized. Again, reflecting, although Venus is not aspect to Hecate, it's very much picking up on the themes that I was talking about just before. And with Jupiter here, again, there is this new understanding of these values, of this self-worth, of these gifts and talents that might have perhaps before been seen as weird and wonderful, but actually they have got so much to give, so much to offer. And, it is almost the path to expansion and growth. And Jupiter in this trine is really helping us to understand that and to get our heads around it, but also to understand it from a very deep inner level, because often, we have to really learn. We have to know things at an inner level before we can truly believe them. And again, it feels like this is what is taking place at this time. So the other aspect or feature of this chart is something, it involves asteroid Atlantis. Now, asteroid Atlantis at 27 degrees of Libra at this time is in a quincunx or inconjunct to Neptune at 27 degrees of Pisces. And it's also inconjunct Uranus at 23 degrees of Taurus. Now, when we have two inconjuncts pointing at one, so we have a sextile, obviously, between Neptune and Uranus that has been in operation for some time. But when both the planets in sextile are inconjunct one other planet or point, this becomes a yod. Now, I may find sort of some seasoned astrologers telling me that you can't have a yod with an asteroid, and that may well be the case, but for me this is speaking so loud and clear that I can't ignore it, so I really want to share it. So the energy of a yod really is it's very powerful. I mean, they say, when I read about yods, it always says it's quite a rare pattern to see in a chart, but I have to say that most of my clients have got yods in them. I certainly have one, and it is described as the finger of God or the finger of fate. And when we see a yod in the chart, it is very much drawing attention to some karmic patterns or some ancestral energies that that particular person in the birth, if it appears in their birth chart, is here to break. Now, obviously, this isn't a birth chart we're looking at. So this is something that is perhaps more relevant for the collective, but it feels like we are at this time when we are breaking a very deep held, long-standing ancestral and karmic pattern and energy. So both, yep, Neptune and Uranus are pointing to and interacting with Atlantis, but it is not particularly, shall we say, harmonious or flowing. Inconjuncts or quincunxes are connect to signs that really don't have a lot in common. They don't really have a lot to say to each other, but because there's this connection, they are being brought together for a reason. They have to navigate the energies, they have to navigate the challenge. So it creates friction rather than conflict, and it's creating sort of some strain, but when you work through the strain and when you're able to navigate it and almost kind of accept that that's how it is, there is huge potential for growth and transformation. And obviously, with this yod, the apex or the fulcrum is asteroid Atlantis. So whatever is kind of coming up here is very much bringing light to, or bringing a focal point to Atlantis and the energies of Atlantis. Now, I'm going to try and break it down a little bit because it is speaking to me so strongly. So whenever we have sort of the fulcrum, the focal point, it's really showing us the challenge that needs to be overcome. And, you know, you'll know if you've been following my channel for a while that I have been talking about Atlantis more as part of our collective soul ancestral history that for so many people and for so many souls does carry challenges that we are here to work through, carrying trauma and wounding that is, in my opinion or in my belief, to be transmuted, cleared, and healed in this particular lifetime. And, I can see there are so many patterns being repeated and playing out within our world as it stands in 2024 and the times we're in now that have roots and have energies that link back to what happened in Atlantis. And ultimately, Atlantis was this amazing civilization where there was so much wisdom, there was so many amazing energies, amazing abilities. It has been described as a golden age where humanity at that time was in a state of much higher consciousness than we are currently. And so many of us have memories of or access to, the most incredible abilities, particularly in the healing fields that we have brought through in this lifetime. But there is also a lot of shadow linked to Atlantis because technology was much more advanced in that time, because there were so many gifts. There were souls who started to bring corruption to that, to try and overpower, to try and steal what they felt would help them to become more powerful. And the power, this sort of the quest for power created an imbalance. It created greed, it created corruption, which ultimately turned into deep trauma because the imbalance came with the powers became so out of balance that ultimately Atlantis fell. And it was that desire for control and the materialism and taking what didn't belong to others ultimately created one of the biggest wounds in humanity's soul records. And, again, it is my belief that so many souls incarnated in these times had or have connections to, have lifetimes, have memories, whether they're hidden in the subconscious or not, but connections to Atlantean times and some of the events that took place there. And I feel that the Atlantean history is very sort of tied up in the witch wound because there was such a high degree of misuse of sacred, spiritual, divine gifts, knowledge, and wisdom that I think for so many of us, this idea that we're carrying that it isn't safe to use those gifts, to have access to that knowledge and that wisdom, to share it with others, that somehow if we do, it's going to trigger the same thing, the same events that happened in Atlantis that was so hugely traumatic because the civilization sank, so many lives were lost. A lot of the wisdom was not lost, that it was taken to other parts of our world, and kept safe, but in many cases had to be kept hidden. So there is this sense of having to keep things hidden, of not shining your light, of not claiming your gifts because there is fear that it may trigger, the horrors that happened before. There's also been a lot of over lifetimes, anyone who has used their gift and who have stepped into their power have been seen as a threat to the patriarchal system, to those who want to control. And therefore, the divine feminine has been suppressed, has been scorned, has been vilified and persecuted, along with anybody that had or was seen to be using special, mystical, sacred, divine gifts, which created, patterns, lifetimes of people who were more in connection with their intuition, with their gifts, with their abilities. They were persecuted, they were ostracized, they were shunned, they were vilified, they were exploited, they were shamed, they were rejected, they were abandoned. Ultimately, huge distrust was created around the witch, the heretic, the wise woman. They were seen to be dangerous. They were seen to pose a risk, to pose a threat. And therefore, society was encouraged to fear them, to shun them, and to silence them ultimately. And so many of us have this wound that we've carried where we have experienced that. And that causes this deep inner core fear and this core belief that it is not safe to be seen. It is not safe to shine your light. It is not safe to share your wisdom, to use your gifts, to use your voice, that somehow if you do, it's going to trigger the same story that happened and has happened so many times before. So this leads us to want to hide and conceal and maybe even sort of just almost turn our backs on the gifts that we have. But it is my belief that this is the lifetime where all that is cleared, because if we continue to sort of shy away or keep things in the shadow, we are rejecting or disconnecting and separating ourselves from part of ourselves. And that prevents us from stepping into the wholeness of who we are. So we've been locked in this pattern, this ancestral pattern, time and time and time and time again, which I do feel, although it's played out in many of the star systems and many of the parts of our earthly human history, I do feel that this has got really strong connections to Atlantis. And the fact, just coming back to this yod, that sort of went off, that wasn't a tangent, but it probably went on a bit longer than it should have done. The fact that we now have this yod pointing at Atlantis feels as if it is time to break those patterns. And the fact that Uranus in Taurus is at the base, sort of holding the space, allowing us to break through, to cut through all that has been hidden, and a lot of it has been buried in the earth in the form of crystals, but it is helping us to almost collapse some of these old fixed ideas, these fixed wounds, these fixed associations, these fixed beliefs, and also help us to access a new sense of worth and value and see these amazing resources that we have always had access to, that perhaps we have either been forced to abandon and reject, or that we have actually done that ourselves. So this is very much about awakening to what was lost and what we've always carried. So helping us to sort of bring those shadow aspects back into the light to help us move forward. And then, of course, with Neptune on the other side of this sextile, again, that is really beautiful because it is giving us this higher faith. It is shining this beautiful light of compassion onto this wound and to all this ancestral trauma. that we have been carrying. It is helping us to surrender and to let go, because Neptune and Pisces, really encourages us to let go of any attachment, to step beyond, to step into that void, into that higher space, and to transcend it ultimately. It acknowledges, because Pisces is very linked to suffering and is often associated with being the victim. It acknowledges that there has been pain and suffering, but actually there was purpose in that, and that this is the lifetime that we are able to release it. And it brings a real element of forgiveness into this whole pattern as well. And the fact that in order to release the wounds, to clear the wounds, and to awaken to our higher selves and to the gifts that perhaps, we have kept hidden, we need to be able to forgive. We need to be able to forgive all the versions of ourselves where we have kept ourselves small, kept ourselves in the shadows, kept ourselves out of the light. But we also have to be able to forgive any other souls that perhaps, we had agreed to experience this alongside or with, whether they had been, in a position of perhaps a more negative role or a positive. It has all been designed to help us learn and help us grow and help us evolve. But the fact that we have got this yod here at this time just feels absolutely pertinent. Now, what's even more interesting, when we start to bring the fixed stars into this yod, you will, if you know anything about fixed stars, you will know that 23 degrees of Taurus is a conjunction to Capulus in the Perseus constellation. So again, quite close to Algol. I've talked about Algol a lot as well, Algol being at 26 degrees of Taurus. So this again is, Algol is about that divine feminine, that goddess monster, and being frozen in fear, frozen in time. Also having your, attempting to have your energy, your power source cut off, because obviously Medusa is linked to Algol and she lost her head. But Perseus, Capulus, brings in the more masculine energy. This is about having drive, courage, force, having the power, taking the action to create this awakening, to create this almost destabilizing energy so that we can see what we have buried, that we can access what has been hidden beneath the surface. There's a really strong warrior energy here as well, which is really important because we need that to help us overcome the obstacles that we perceive to be standing in our way. Perseus and Capulus, of course, the sword of justice, cutting through all those illusions, cutting through all those attachments, so that we can find that freedom that Uranus wants us to find and connect with, clearing the path, getting rid of the confusion, the doubts, any resistance, getting us to the point of truth, integrity, and justice, which again is really key in this whole yod aspect, and helping us to really transmute any anger and any aggression and any pain into purpose, into something that we can use as a force for good, rather than being caught up in it, and rather than allowing that to hold us down and keep us stuck in this state of never-ending wounding, pain, and trauma. So this is about cutting all of that free. And then if we go across to Neptune, Neptune is conjunct Shiat in the Pegasus constellation. So this beautiful star really helps us to rise up and see things from a much higher perspective. Shiat and Pegasus is the flying horse, the way shower, the pathfinder. This is about finding new ways, moving through the fog, being able to see beyond, sort of almost beyond the horizon, to new ways. It is very prophetic and very visionary, very mystical energy, very multidimensional, helping us to connect with a future version of ourselves, which again is going to help us release from the past, because we do need to be able to let go of the past trauma and the wounding if we are to rise up and move forward. It is very supportive in helping us to transcend the struggles and the sacrifice and the suffering, because obviously there has been huge amounts of that throughout time. It gives us greater strength and greater wisdom. Again, that knowing, that faith. It may be blind faith because we may not be able to see what lies beyond the horizon, but it's having the faith to keep going and to know that we have this guidance and this more spiritual aspect of ourselves that is always knows where we're going, even when we cannot. And it helps free us from inner sort of turmoil and unresolved issues that again have kept us trapped. So this is very much a lightness of being, flying high, flying to new lands, new ways. And then at the top next to Atlantis, we have Arcturus and Speaker. Arcturus, really beautiful energy to have in this yod because the Arcturians are very much invested in emotional healing. So there is absolutely healing coming to the Atlantean wounds at this time. The Arcturians are also, in a way, they are way showers, but they are very supportive at times of transition. It's said that when a soul comes into the earthly physical human body and when it leaves, it moves through the Arcturian stargate or portal. So the Arcturians are masters at holding space for us, showing us the way, making sure that we get from one state to the other, that with ease, with grace, that it all happens exactly as it is supposed to. And obviously with Arcturus, we have, this balance, this sense of harmony coming in, but also collaboration, this understanding that we have these beautiful star beings working with us, supporting us, collaborating with us. This is a partnership. This is Libra energy, but it is also bringing a sense of peace. And I always see Libra as agreements and contracts. And this is very much about, working with what essentially is a karmic contract in order to bring harmony, to bring peace, and to bring justice so that we can move forward into a higher state. So really, really beautiful energies to have working with us. And of course, the whole time as well, we've got Eris in opposition to asteroid Atlantis. Eris is the female warrior, the goddess of discord and strife. She definitely brings some chaos to the situation, but she wants to have a voice. She wants to be heard. And in Aries, again, this is a real warrior energy. This is having the courage to step into who you are, to speak up, to sort of talk and speak up and fight for those who have been marginalized, fight for those who have been wronged, where justice has not been served. And so again, to have Eris playing a part in this as well is really, really very profound and powerful. And, I mentioned in my last video about the kite. You can see it really clearly here. We've got the south node pointing at Neptune and the North Node in Aries, and then with these beautiful energies of Taurus, so Uranus and Taurus, and Pluto in Aquarius, holding that space, helping us to awaken, to break free, but also to experience deep transformation. And obviously, the way at the tip of the kite is through Neptune, but also through the North Node, which is now approaching this conjunction with Neptune in Pisces. So again, taking that, stepping into more of who you are, but that is very much more aligned with a more spiritual way of being. And I also love the fact that, the elements of this yod, we've got the water in Neptune and Pisces, which obviously so strongly associated with Atlantis, which ultimately experienced the Great Flood. We've got the earth in with Uranus here, which for me is sort of paying homage to the fact that so much wisdom is held within the earth, but also within our physical bodies, that we are actually conduits for that wisdom, that we hold it within our cellular memory. And it is just about finding ways to access it, to have it awakened within us. And then obviously at the top here with this air, cardinal air, which really helps to bring in the light, but also the understanding and the wisdom that is needed to help us navigate our way through this yod and the releasing of all this karma. And obviously, just to bring in some of the cosmic fixed star energies, Hecate is conjunct the Shapley attractor 2 degrees out. Shapley is at 2 degrees of Scorpio, but Hecate is really working with this cosmic point to see the truth of a situation and to step into complete and total authenticity through the influence of the Shapley, which is a very powerful cosmic point, stripping away all those old stories, all those understandings, all those energies that are stopping us, or Hecate, the goddess of witchcraft, from being exactly who she was destined to be. And that is very much for all of us. And then with Pluto at 0 degrees, Pluto is conjunct Altair. And Altair is a really interesting star. It's in the Aquila constellation. So this is the eagle. Again, being able to rise up, to see a bigger picture, to not necessarily be able to hone in on the detail, because that can be quite difficult for the eagle, but again, just to have that higher perspective, to feel more sovereign, to feel more empowered and more encouraged, to have more courage, but to feel more encouraged to do the work that needs to be done at this time to experience the transformation. And Altair also has links to Atlantis. Whenever I see Altair in the chart, I will always check for asteroid Atlantis, because there are very close links to the two and to all the associated history there. Altair is also linked to spells, to magic, to illusion, also to sort of manipulation and hypnotic energies as well. So there can be associations here with the dark arts and with slightly more nefarious activity. But again, because Pluto is very much sort of working with Altair, this is uncovering where perhaps there has been manipulation, where there has been hypnotic trance-like energies at play, maybe stopping us from seeing the truth of a situation, and perhaps working with false light and manipulating light and access to the power that comes through the goddess of witchcraft and magic. So this is really, really transformative, really powerful, really deeply healing, but also non-negotiable, because the square will not allow the energy to lie. It creates so much tension, so much challenge, that you absolutely have to work with it. And that is what feels very true for this particular time. Now, the last thing I want to draw attention to, and I could probably go on all day, is the fact that the sun at 0 degrees is in a quincunx, or in conjunct to Sedna at 0 degrees of Gemini. Now, we talked about the quincunx energy before as part of the yod, because the sun is in Capricorn. So this kind of brings us back to the patriarchy and that sort of top-down control. Sedna was able to release herself from that, but in order to do that, she had to let go of everything she knew. She had to undergo the ultimate transformation. And, this was extreme betrayal. So again, with these two energies working together and the sun shining a light on it, it is as if we have this opportunity to really work through that energy of betrayal, the energy of abandonment, of rejection, and the wounds that created, which comes back to Hecate, comes back to Atlantis, comes back to all of these other energies that all seem to have a really maybe slightly different role to play in this chart, but ultimately they're all pointing to exactly the same theme. And for me, Sedna in Gemini is able to find her voice. She's able to release herself from the wound of betrayal and the fear of speaking out and the fear of what will happen. What will the patriarchy do? What will the forces of power do if I do use my voice, if I do connect to my gifts, if I do sort of start to step into exactly who I am? And at the same time as she is in retrograde motion at this time, this is about unlocking stories and ideas and beliefs and new ways of seeing things that have been frozen in time, but are slowly that are slowly thawing out so that we can see the truth. And obviously with Sedna in trine to Pluto, again, Pluto is really lending this supportive energy which is working on the behalf of the collective. So this is for all of us, whether we're aware of it or not, but helping us to step into a more empowered version of who we are, to go into the depths, to see the wounds that have, affected humanity that we've been working with for lifetimes, and to transform where perhaps there was an abuse or imbalance of power and control, and to bring new light a new air, a new understanding to it through the air trine. So I am going to leave that there. I could talk about the fact that the Pleiades are conjunct Sedna as well. And as I say almost every time, there are so many other things that I could bring into this chart, but it just felt like it was speaking to me so deeply and so profoundly. And I really hope, it is my belief and my hope and my intention that, if you are someone who is affected by the witch wound or the fear of not being able to, hang on, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. I can talk to the camera. There we are. Yeah, if you are someone that has been affected by this, whether it's likely to be something that you're aware of in this lifetime, but I suspect it goes back to previous lifetimes. It really feels as if we are at the tipping point of being able to push through this. Obviously, it takes courage, it takes a lot of determination. It is not something that can be done overnight necessarily, but equally, it feels that now is the time because we have to let go of all the aspects of ourselves and of the self that are holding us back from becoming whole. And that includes all those shadow elements, all the wounds, all the trauma that is really keeping us stuck in one state where we need to start to transform into a different one, a higher one, a lighter one, effectively, a lighter one ultimately. So I hope you have enjoyed what I have had to share. It's just, for me, it's really helpful to be able to talk about what I'm seeing. It really helps me to process it as well. But again, it feels like it's something that I need to share. It feels important. So I hope that you have received it in the way it was intended. And let me know what you think. And please, if you know of the people that you feel this would help or be of interest to, please do share it so that, I can get my insight out to more people. So thank you so much for watching. I wish you so much love, and I will be back soon.